Hi, this is Dennis McCullough from Nerds of Babylon, and you're listening to the Southsider Studios podcasting system. For more great podcast programming, visit SouthsiderStudios.com or search Southsider Studios on iTunes.
Psst, hey, you got Stitcher? Well, we're on it, so get it! Southsider Studios now on Stitcher. Stitcher is an award-winning provider of news and talk radio for your mobile phone. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Hello, Cinesmackers, and welcome back to another episode of Cinesmack. This is Bout 20, and joining me, as usual, is Mr. Tom Haggis.
Hey, greetings and salutations, everybody.
Mr. Sam Twalmy.
Howdy, Cinesmackers!
I was trying to decide which voice that was.
Mr. Gabriel Rowald.
Good evening, Cinesmackers.
And our special guest this month is, he's actually from Frame Shop Media, and we've gotten to know him through the 48. He's on Team Nick Wilson.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on, Nick. Guys, real quick, before we kick this episode off, I want to say congratulations to Tom, Gabe, and Nick on 3 great films. I was able to watch all 3 of them, and I really enjoyed them. So kudos goes out to you guys. You guys keep raising the bars up.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
And a really big congratulations to Sam for running another successful 48. This is your 7th 48, Sam?
Yeah, 7.
Oh, no, you didn't do the first year, did you?
Right, 8th for the City of Des Moines, and my 7th year producing.
Yeah.
And we actually had 51 participants this year, and that's a record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So congratulations, man. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks.
If you weren't doing it, the show wouldn't even be available for download. So, yeah. And
I appreciate that. I think it's the reason I keep doing it is because of the filmmakers like all of you on the panel and our moderator. It's always amazing to see what kind of creativity we have right here in our own backyard, and I'm always amazed every year.
So am I. Like this year was no exception. I think a lot of the usual teams really kind of went a different way. They went a different route, and I really liked it. And then you got a lot of new teams in, and you can tell they're hungry. They want to do it, and in like a year or two, they're going to be hitting them out of the park. So, yeah, it was a good year, really good year. All right, well, let's go ahead and we'll move on to Poking the Monkey, and we'll find out what this bout number 20 is all about. That didn't sound right.
Ladies and gentlemen, big knockers and hard knockers, welcome to tonight's main event. In the first corner, from 2008, directed by Darren Aronofsky, starring Mickey Rourke, Marissa Tomei, and Evan Rachel Wood, the wrestler. In the second corner, from 2011, directed by Thomas McCarthy, starring Paul Giamatti, Amy Ryan, and Jeffrey Tambor. Win-win!
All right, well then, there you go. I should say really quick that Nick Wilson is actually the mechanic for the new Mars rover. So he is calling in from Mars. Thanks for that's long distance, man. Really long distance.
I'm willing to pay the price. Whatever it takes for Cinesmack. I'm in it to win it. So.
Right on. All right. Well, let's see. Let's go ahead and figure out what you guys think about the writing. And we'll start with Tom.
I am so excited for this episode because I watched both of these films last night, and I have spent the whole day just in tortured silence going back and forth between the two of them. I've got the 4 points to divvy up, and I was like, and honestly asking myself, I'm not a big Mickey Rourke fan, so I'm going to be honest with you that I really went into The Wrestler not being too excited about it. But on the face of the scripts, I thought that Win-Win was a really tight script, and it's one that I think on the page probably wouldn't have come across as well as it does up on the screen. The Wrestler, on the other hand, is really, it's inside the life of something, a lot of us guys that grew up, in the 80s and early 90s when professional wrestling was at its peak would be really interested in this life. Where are these wrestlers now, and what are their lives like? And what they portray with Ram is probably not too far off from reality for some of these guys. Because we're older and we've lost interest in it. Not all of us. Every now and then I'm flipping channels and I see a WWE Raw thing and I'm like, oh my god, I think I know that kid from school. But I think Robert Siegel's script for The Wrestler was really, really great, and I was really I didn't have as very high expectations for The Wrestler. I mean, I knew it was really good and it got nominated for 2 Oscars, and I should have expected to enjoy it as much as I did, and I didn't. And so much of my movie experience is tied up in my expectations, and so because of that, for the script, I'd give my first vote to The Wrestler.
All right. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Sam.
Well, I think both of these scripts tell very different stories on very different scales. In some way, I think The Wrestler is a more intimate story about a single person, following him through his experiences and what his life is all about, whereas Win-Win kind of gives us a broader scope, more of a family tale that doesn't necessarily focus on one individual. But I think what Win-Win does is focus on how individuals affect everyone, and how it's more about the group dynamic for Win-Win. I really like The Wrestler. I, too, watched wrestling a lot when I was younger, growing up in the 80s in the heyday of wrestling. And there's a lot of talk when The Wrestler came out that some groups were upset that it was exposing secrets of professional wrestling, which at that point in 2008, the doors pretty much had been blown open, and there was really not that sense that this thing was real. Like everyone knew that it was more of an entertainment type show. I think I'm going to have to go with Win-Win for the script, just because it does tell a smaller story, one that is, I believe, more relatable to a larger audience. There is a lot of wrestling in it, but that's kind of a small portion of the overall story. And for me, as far as being able to identify with it, I think Win-Win is a little more accessible to a wider audience because it doesn't focus just on the wrestling aspect. I was able to enjoy that wrestling aspect quite a lot because I used to be very much into it. But there's just so much hope in Win-Win, and The Wrestler has its moments of redemption as well. But there's just so many great messages in Win-Win, all the way to the very end of the story, where you see the lead character, has had his tribulations and has to, take another job. But when asked how he's doing, he's okay, because everything is kind of right with his world as far as his life and his family. And I think it's very beautiful. And so I'm going to give my vote to Win-Win.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Gabe.
Yeah, I agree with these gentlemen that this will be an interesting match because they're both really great films, but they're also very different from each other. And it definitely starts with the writing. I've seen The Wrestler twice now. And it's interesting because I agree with Sam in that it's a very intimate story. It's and we'll get into it a little bit more in some of the other categories. Even the way it's filmed is a very intimate kind of thing. But it's definitely a very personal story about a single individual, pretty much, and his impact on other people's lives, and the consequences of the choices that he's made. Mm-hmm. I thought both were very strong, but my problem with The Wrestler is that both times I've seen it, I felt like it's kind of predictable. I kind of know where it's going. It's when you find out that he has a daughter. Spoiler alert, by the way. Anybody who hasn't seen it yet, spoilers coming. You find out that he has a daughter, an estranged daughter. Well, you know where that's going. He's gonna patch that up, and then he's gonna screw it up. And then you kind of get the idea of where the relationship is going with the stripper. It's like, oh no, this isn't gonna work. In the last minute, she comes in and says, "I'm here for you," and then it's too late. And he has a heart attack, but he's unwilling to take care of himself. You just feel like there's this, and maybe that's part of the gravity of the story is that inevitable momentum that's drawing him to this end that just can't be avoided. You know it's coming, and there's a part of you that wants it to be different, mm-hmm. but it's just not going to be. But to me, if you've got a good story but it's kind of predictable, then I think you have to change your storytelling approach, in my opinion, and do something where maybe you tell it a little bit out of order. Maybe you show us the end. Maybe we know that he dies of a heart attack in the ring, and then we go back and like, wow, how did he get here? And so now we're interested in that. So I just felt like the storytelling there was a little bit predictable. Now, it's hard to say that Win-Win wasn't also predictable in its own way, that in some way there's going to be all these conflicts and they're going to resolve them somehow, because it had the tone of being a little bit more hopeful type movie. It had some serious situations in them, but they never felt quite as... they didn't have as much gravity as The Wrestler. And it was still kind of predictable, but... It was, to me, it was a little bit more satisfying, and you knew it was coming, but you just didn't know how they were going to get there. It was like Sam said, it was a very enjoyable story. It was very uplifting. It had a lot of positive messages to tell, mm-hmm. and not that that's a criterion for a good movie, and that's not typically what I watch and enjoy, but. I think for me, in the end, Win-Win was a much more enjoyable experience. I felt it was well written. There were more well-rounded characters, and I think my vote has to go to Win-Win.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. Nick, you're up.
I honestly, I'm going to be echoing a lot of the same sentiments that you guys have already talked about. Tom, listening to you say that you were kind of going back and forth between the two films, that's spot on for me. When it comes to writing, to me, this is the category where I felt it was the closest between these two films. And I'll also agree with everyone and say that I really enjoyed both of these films as well. I'd seen both of them previously and watched them each again for this podcast, and definitely picked up on some things and had a little bit different take on each one this time around. But as far as writing, it's honestly almost a coin flip for me between these two films. I think they're both script-wise, I think they're both very good, but I don't know that I would consider either one of them a great script. Mm-hmm. I think that to echo what Sam said, they're obviously very different types of stories. The Win-Win is sort of bringing in a bunch of characters and focusing on their relationships and developing a number of characters. And I personally tend to gravitate toward that kind of story. I enjoy that all of that interaction and the relationships that the characters have. I think it's really well done. I think The Wrestler, I don't know if I felt like it was predictable, like Gabe said, but I definitely felt like it was a type of movie that I've seen before, and it didn't. I don't know that the script was anything that I got too excited about. I mean, I think if I were reading that story again on a page, I don't know that it would jump out at me as something special. Whereas I think Win-Win, despite some flaws and some problems that I do have with the script, it's to me it's a little bit more ambitious. It seems fresher. It seems like a different kind of story. There's some characters that I feel like I haven't necessarily seen before, and I find it really interesting. Some of the questions that are brought up, and some of the interesting quandaries that the characters get themselves into in Win-Win. It just makes for, I think, a more interesting and a little bit more ambitious kind of story. So while I think, again, I have some issues with certain part of the script of Win-Win, which I'll probably touch on a little bit more in the acting category. There's certain characters and certain subplots that I feel like detract a little bit. But I think on the whole, it's a more interesting story to me. I think that some of the other categories in The Wrestler elevate what is sort of a good but not great script. But I think if you're looking strictly at the script, I would also voice my vote for Win-Win.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Normally I would try and throw out some little piece of trivia, but there's nothing for Win-Win, and there's not very much for The Wrestler as far as writing is concerned. I have a few really good pieces for some of the acting, but yeah, let's go ahead and we'll just move right along, and we'll go to our next category, which is, what do you know? Acting. We start with Sam this time. Sam.
Wow. A lot of these coming up categories are going to be really tough because there's so many elements in both of these films which are noteworthy for discussion. And, we say it a lot that we encourage our listeners to check these films out if they haven't seen them and let us know how we're wrong and what we didn't get right. I think this time is a perfect example of that. These are both really great films. They're very different, but they're definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen them before. Acting, man, this one is a really tough one because there are some amazing performances in both films. Ensemble-wise, if you start with Win-Win, you have another great performance by Paul Giamatti, but also it's peppered with other performances such as Bobby Cannavale and Jeffrey Tambor. I mean, you gotta love Jeffrey Tambor. And I know a lot of us are really excited about the upcoming new season of Arrested Development and all the pictures that have been floating around from the set they've been shooting. He's always a joy, even in a small role. He brings a smile to my face. Really great work by Burt Young as as Leo. He first got his start in the Rocky movies, and before this film, you hadn't seen him in a motion picture in several years. So it great turn from him. And then a newcomer, Alex Schaffer, who played Kyle. What great casting! It was an opportunity because he was newer at the time. There was no baggage that you would have of a traditional star, say if it was like a Zac Efron or something like that, where you'd seen other performances and you kind of come into it with expectations. He filled the role of Kyle perfectly and gave you that kind of edgy balance, but I didn't feel it was predictable at all. Tom earlier had said that he wasn't a big fan of Mickey Rourke, and I agree with him. I usually don't like Mickey Rourke at all, to be very honest. But there was something about his performance in The Wrestler. There's a reason that this was a comeback film for him, because in a lot of ways he kind of left any ego or any baggage that he had from years of not working or feeling that he was underappreciated, and he threw himself into the work. There's also a great supporting cast in The Wrestler. I think Marissa Tomei turns in a tremendous performance, a very gutsy performance, actually, or you could say a titsy performance, which it was. When we go to acting, I'm also going to include like Marissa Tomei's tits as supporting, or she was supporting them, whichever it was. She went for it. She went all the way. And I think we'll also talk about some of their performances and how they were crafted in the directing section. I usually don't like Mickey Rourke. I'll say it again. But there was something that really rang true about his performance. There were some really subtle levels there that kind of gave you a glimpse into this character. And as much as I like Win-Win and a lot of the performances from the ensemble, I think it's some great acting work there. I think as far as the acting category, I'm going to have to cast my vote for The Wrestler for the nuanced performances of Mickey Rourke and Marissa Tomei.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Gabe?
Yeah, well, this one is definitely going to be interesting because this was going to be a lot closer than last month's episode.
Anything would be closer.
There really is in this particular category, I think too is going to be very difficult to decide because there's great acting on both sides here. You really can't go wrong with Paul Giamatti, and Mickey Rourke does turn in a great performance. And I don't know that I had any preconceived notion about my feelings toward Mickey Rourke. So, I'm not like the other guys where I'm like, oh, I don't like him, but, I think his performance was excellent. And I think maybe, this character kind of maybe in some ways mirrors his own life, his own experience, because it is the kind of thing where you had your glory days and those are gone now. And you so desperately want them back that you'll do just about anything, even risk your own life. And I'm not saying that Mickey Rourke risked his life, but I feel like he did kind of have his heyday, and that was gone. And he had made some decisions that led him away from acting, and he was doing other things. And I feel like maybe that kind of informs his performance in this instance, and maybe that's what makes it so so palpable and so real, is that he kind of knows this character maybe better than anybody else, and so his performance is great. And I also have to second Sam's vote for Marissa Tomei and her lovely breasts. But she's a beautiful woman, and she a great actress. And it does take a little bit of courage. I don't know why we always say that it takes a little courage to be naked on stage or on screen, but I think it probably does. But it was called for her character, and it's not like I don't think it was gratuitous in any way. And there was also this vulnerability in her character, in that she was her character was aging, and she wasn't getting the kind of business that she was used to, and what she relied on for her livelihood was leaving her, and so there was this vulnerability. She was uncomfortable with it, and I think Marissa Tomei brought that out in that character. There was this vulnerability to her, this disappointment that she wasn't young and as beautiful as she had been, and it was impacting her life. So I thought she brought that kind of vulnerability to the character, and it was good. Now on the win-win side, yeah, I mean. I like Paul Giamatti quite a bit, and whenever I see that he's in a movie, I'm like, oh, this will be good. I think he makes good choices, and he's a good actor. But there's also a part of me that feels like he's kind of Paul Giamatti in a lot of his roles. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit kind of the same, and he's almost kind of like he has a type that he can play, kind of. Not to belittle his skill. I mean, he's a great actor, but I feel like this movie was kind of his type, if you know what I mean. It's like, well, we need somebody who's, maybe he's not a leading role looking kind of guy. He's not super handsome. He's a little bit of a schlub, a little bit, doesn't maybe have that much self-confidence. Paul Giamatti, not to say that he doesn't have that in real life, but that's kind of his type. That's kind of the character he plays. And there was great acting, great supporting roles there. And I even kind of liked Amy Ryan. I'm not sure that it was really that much of a stretch for her. And I don't know that, but there was something I liked about her. She seemed very genuine. And if I were that kid, I felt like, yeah, I would really like her. She seems very genuine. She's very open, and so I liked even her performance in that. And definitely the supporting roles were very strong in that movie. Yeah, so it's really a tough decision between these two. But I think because of the gravity and the nuances of the performances, I'm going to have to give my vote to the wrestler in this case.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. Nick?
Yeah. So I generally I'm finding myself agreeing with a lot of what's being said.
That's right. We call this Cine Agree.
Boring. That's pretty boring. So I'm gonna pick on a couple of things that I didn't agree with and play a little Cinesmack here. So,
all right.
When I had to key in on what Sam said about, he mentioned Bobby, is it Cannavale or Cannavale? I don't know how you say his name. That plays the character of Terry in Win-Win. This and I touched on it a little bit in the writing section. To me, the element of Win-Win that stuck out like a sore thumb was this character. And if there was one flaw of this movie that time and time again seemed to take me out of the film and I just felt like it was out of place, it was this character of Terry. I felt like there were these weird sort of subplots of his, where he and Jeffrey Tambor's character are kind of at odds, and there's this weird bitterness going on, and these little kind of side stories that to me felt really out of place and kind of pointless. And his performance to me in what was, as the others have touched on, a really very solid overall ensemble performance. I always like Paul Giamatti. I think he's really good in this. I echo what Sam said about Alex Schaefer as Kyle. I thought he gave a really, really good performance. I loved Amy Ryan in this movie. Gabe touched on it a little bit. She was my favorite part of this movie. I found myself just really enjoying every time she was on screen. I thought, I know her from The Office. Probably a lot of people know her from The Office, and I always enjoyed her on that. And I think there's just something about her that comes across as very real. I think she's got a really natural, genuine quality that is, it's just a natural thing. And she's really great. I think her relationships with the other characters are great. Those three characters are really a solid ensemble together, and I feel like the Terry character is just seems out of his league to me. I feel like he's got some themes where he's sort of goofy. The comedy feels forced. It seems just out of place with the tone of the rest of the film. So to me, that's the drawback of the cast of what I think is a really overall a very good ensemble cast in Win-Win. So there's that. As far as the wrestler, I don't know what it really I can say that somebody else hasn't already said or is going to say. Marissa Tomei is very good. I've liked her in everything I've seen her in. Evan Rachel Wood as the daughter, I thought was good. I think they both have their moments. I don't know that I think either one of them are tremendous standouts, but honestly, Mickey Rourke in this movie is just amazing. And I didn't really come to it with any preconceived notions. I don't know that I haven't seen Mickey Rourke in a lot. I didn't have any real opinion of him one way or the other. I think regardless of what any kind of feelings you might have had coming into it, it's impossible to ignore the performance that he gives in this film. It's just amazing. And I think the thing I was really struck by watching this film again for the podcast, I was struck by just how much he carried this film. I mean, obviously it's a movie about him. He's the main character, but I mean, He is everything in this film. I mean, you are seeing almost the entire film from his point of view. There's very, very little of this film that takes place outside of his kind of scope, and his worldview. And it's tough to say, what's more impressive, an ensemble cast where you've got several people who are all kind of supporting and doing their part, or a movie like The Wrestler where it is literally they just pick this movie up and put it on his shoulders and he carries it, and he gives, I think, the best, overall performance of anybody in any of these films. So I think if you're asking me to, put these two movies in a fist fight, it's going to be a good fight, but if I had to put money on it, give me the team that has the one best performance out of any of them. And to me, that's Mickey Rourke. So I would go with The Wrestler.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Looks like we go to Tom.
All righty. Gabe kind of touched on it a little bit, that there you can draw some parallels between Mickey Rourke's real life and Ram's life inside the story, and this comeback. And I like Marissa Tomei. I want to preface what I'm about to say before I say that. I really like her, and I always have. But I felt like I was watching Marissa Tomei play Marissa Tomei the stripper, her character seemed to kind of run the same. I feel like she's been a little pigeonholed ever since My Cousin Vinny. That there's a certain style and economic status that she usually gets cast into, and I don't think it's fair because I think that she's a much better actress than what she's been given. What I really love about The Wrestler is how, and they could have easily left this out, and I would probably credit to Darren Aronofsky, but I'm going to stick it in the acting part because a lot of it has to do with Mickey Rourke's acting also, is how likable they make him. The part when he wakes up and he jumps out of the van, he's playing with the kids, and the effort that he makes to reconnect with his daughter, and as people can debate whether how genuine it really was, but and I the movie really had me hooked, and I really empathized with him, even through when he was doing some really horrible stuff in bathrooms. And even through that, I was like, I could understand that because he took the job and he was dealing with the customers in retail, and I think a lot of people know what that's like. Up until the very end, and he gets to the end, and he has this other life within his grasp, and he decides to just finish his life inside the world of wrestling, and the movie really kind of lost me there at the end. As far as when Paul Giamatti's great. He's fantastic. He always is. So I'm not even going to bother talking about him. I really like Amy Ryan. I don't watch The Office, so I was really kind of first exposed to her watching Gone Baby Gone. And it was nice to watch this. I was like, wow, she really cleans up. So in addition, Jeff Tambor is fantastic. Burt Young was really great. Alex Schaefer, I think they said this was his first movie that he'd ever done. They just kind of found a kid that could wrestle and put him in it. And I would love to be able to sit down with the director and talk with him and say, was this just, Alex being Alex, or was this actually some acting that he was doing? Because his delivery and everything seemed so nonchalant and just kind of off the shoulder with what he said. up until the scene with his mom in the hotel room when he finally goes at her. But I'm going to give my vote for acting to Win-Win because I thought the acting throughout, going really deep into the supporting cast, was really, really strong. And I have just got to say one quick note to Margot Martindale is one of my favorite character actresses out there right now. She is fantastic. She was really great in the TV show called The Riches, and she was really great on Justified. And
oh yes,
she is just a wonderful actress, and I love seeing her. And it's it's like digging through a bag of Brock's candy and finding a butterscotch at the bottom. Like, oh, thank God, there's some hope left in this bag. So the bag is the movie, not her. I didn't mean to say that. So
thanks, Tom.
just want to clear that up.
Thanks for the clarification.
Margot doesn't send her people down to break my knees. So yeah, I'd like to give my vote to Win-Win because mostly I'm going to give it to the supporting cast, but all due respect to Mickey Rourke. So
all right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you guys a question, and then I'm going to give a little piece of trivia, and then we'll come back to you guys. For each movie, the lead roles, Mickey Rourke, Paul Giamatti, who would you have cast differently in those roles? I mean, just off the top of your head, who do you guys think would have done, I'm not saying a better job, but who would you cast if that was your movie back in pre-production? I'll give you a minute to think about it because I found this piece of trivia actually really funny. Scott Siegel, the actor who portrayed a steroids dealer in the film, was arrested a few months after the film's release for steroids possession and assaulting federal officers. So, life imitating art. You guys have any ideas? Do I need to pick one of you? Or one of you got one?
I would really like to see Mel Gibson in The Wrestler.
Oh,
I think it would have been a groundbreaking film for him, and I don't know, maybe cast off some of his demons. But as for the Paul Giamatti role in Win-Win, I can't really think of anybody else that would do as well. Maybe like the dad from Modern Family, he might be pretty good in it. But
oh yeah, mm-hmm.
So
okay. Sam, Gabe, Nick.
Well, I think Jeff Bridges may have been an interesting choice for Win-Win. I love Paul Giamatti's work, and maybe Jeff Bridges is a little too, higher profile, but I think he could have done a great job. I think both of these films are really well cast. It'd be hard to find, someone to do it better. Great idea, Tom, about Mel Gibson. It could have been a big breakthrough for him, but that's all I got.
All right, thanks, Sam.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough thing because, like Sam said, I think obviously we talked about these are both really good performances. I think both are really well cast. It's tough to say. I as far as Giamatti's character, the first one to pop into my head is William H. Macy, but that's
damn it! Yeah, you took mine.
Probably just because I want to watch William H. Macy in anything all the time. So that's just ask me that question about just about anything, and I'll say yeah, I'd watch him in that. So honestly, as far as the Ram character in The Wrestler, I just can't even picture it. That's to me, that's a sign of a really great film performance. Is you can't picture someone else in that role, and to me, Mickey Rourke just embodied that role so completely. I mean, I don't know, Macho Man Randy Savage, maybe just whoever, the Undertaker. I don't know these old wrestlers. Throw somebody in there. I don't think anybody could have done it better than what Mickey Rourke did.
All right.
Danny DeVito could have tried. Like Danny DeVito is that's a movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Nick stole my William H. Macy for the role in Win-Win. I pictured that immediately. Like if it weren't Paul Giamatti, William H. Macy, I think. Yeah. As far as a wrestler, I'm trying to think of somebody who would have the physique to look like they had been a wrestler, but also look like they had been broken down a little bit, like time hadn't been good to them. So I was trying to think of who that might be.
Maybe like Channing Tatum in like 20 years or something.
Right. Not now, for sure.
Right.
But I was thinking of maybe some non-traditional people too, who might, who might have been able to pull off the emotional part of it, and maybe might have been able to pull off the physical part of it. Somebody who transforms themselves. I think of Edward Norton. And the way he transformed himself for American History X.
Right.
I mean, you normally think of Edward Norton as kind of an average-sized guy, maybe even kind of skinny, but he was just freaking humongous in American History X, and I think he really pulled off that performance. So I've been trying to think of somebody like that, who might be able to pull it off. But I'm with Nick in that. In certain movies, once they're done, once you've seen it, it's almost impossible to imagine someone else.
Right on. Well, you spoke of American History X. I forgot to tell you guys, I got to meet the guy that film is based on at
Really?
the last film that I was taking part in. Frankie is his name, and he's one of the nicest guys ever, but he's got a lot of tattoos. And but he looks pretty rough too. I don't think I would want to try to take him on. Looks like Darren Aronofsky actually thought about having Sylvester Stallone play the part of the Ram, but he felt it was way too close to Rocky Balboa. So he actually was fighting with the studio to get Mickey Rourke to play the role because, hold on to your seats, they were wanting Nick Cage.
Oh boy, that I cannot see.
Yeah. So
that would have been awful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. All right.
Way to stick to your guns, Mr. Aronofsky.
Yes, sir. Let's
let's all add a point to the directing category right now.
He gets an extra point.
Right. Yeah, he wins.
He saved us from Nick Cage and the wrestler. All right. Well, let's move on to directing. Started off with Gabe.
All right. Well, this one's kind of interesting too. Although I don't think this one's going to be as close, in my opinion. I think both were well directed, and actually, the director of Win-Win, he hasn't directed very many films. Thomas McCarthy, he hasn't really directed that many films, but when he has, he's picked some pretty good ones, and he's done a pretty good job. And Darren Aronofsky, he came from, a very independent background, making small independent films that never really fit the mainstream. And I'm not sure that he really ever has fit kind of a mainstream directing kind of role. He's always taken on stuff that's been challenging, stuff that's been a little bit different, maybe not as accessible as other directors' films. But I've always kind of admired what he's done, and to be honest with you, like I said, I've seen The Wrestler twice. And both times I've left kind of dissatisfied for some reason, and I can't explain it. There's something about it that just really doesn't do much for me. It's well made, it's well acted, it's a good movie. It's maybe even a great movie, but there's something that leaves me kind of empty at the end. And maybe that's the goal, and maybe that's what Darren Aronofsky was trying for, is to give you this feeling. So you would avoid some of the same things that he's done or something. I don't know, but I respect the directing choices. It's very sparse in its style. It's very almost kind of pseudo documentary style. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of shots where it's clearly handheld. It's not terribly steady. The lighting isn't perfect. We go through these hallways. We're following Randy the Ram through these dark hallways out into these wrestling venues, and sometimes it goes almost to complete darkness. You can't see what's going on, and sometimes those scenes seem to go like, "Why is this taking so long? Why are we watching him walk so much?" But there's meaning to it, and I understand the choices, and I respect the choices because, like we talked about before in the writing, it's a very intimate story. And it's almost as if we're following this character around as a documentary crew. Mm-hmm. He's a once famous wrestler who's fallen on hard times, and it seems like something that would be interesting in a documentary on some reality TV show. And that's kind of the feeling that you get with it. And I'm trying to remember. Maybe you guys can help me out. I don't know if I remember too many scenes that are not with Mickey Rourke's character in it, with Randy the Ram in it, where he's, it's like we're seeing something that he wouldn't have seen. I suppose there are, but it just seems like the stylistic choice is almost like right on the edge of being documentary style. And I respect that, but it also seemed at the same time almost kind of low budget. And it didn't seem very polished at times. Although, being a filmmaker, I looked at it and I'm like, well, that clearly took a long time to set up. Right. That's not just random. That didn't just happen. There's a lot of setup there. But to an untrained eye, to me, it seems like it would feel very kind of unpolished, almost incomplete in some sense. So while I respect the choices, I'm not sure I was in love with the end result. Where on the win-win side, there wasn't very much about the actual filmmaking, the directing that stood out to me, that I was like, wow, that was really cool, or that, like the cinematography was that great, or the editing was really cool. But where the thing I respect about that is that the director got out of the way. He let the characters tell the story. Mm-hmm. His directing was more on the acting and on the ensemble and on the storytelling. And it wasn't about like, hey, look at this film technique, or, here's an interesting way to tell this story. It was I have a good story here. I have good characters. I'm going to get out of the way and let this stuff happen. And I think that takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience to be able to do that, to not get in the way of the story. And I think mostly because in the end I was so dissatisfied with The Wrestler twice in many respects. No, really, I watched it with my girlfriend and she said, well, I didn't really like that movie. And I kind of mirrored her sentiment. It's like, I get it. There's great performances, there's great directing, but I still feel empty at the end. So it's hard for me not to give the vote to win-win because I didn't feel empty at the end. It was maybe kind of predictable, maybe a little bit, optimistic, happy ending, unrealistic maybe. But I was more satisfied at the end. And so I think that's a result of some good directing, and I'm going to give my vote to win-win.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. Nick? Oh, God, he's working on the Mars rover.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I had to tighten up some things. I have to go ahead and I'm gonna get smacking again here, and I have to disagree pretty strongly with what Gabe said in terms of his dissatisfaction with the end of The Wrestler. And I know I think Tom had mentioned something about he kind of felt like the movie lost him at the end as well. I had the exact opposite reaction with The Wrestler. I feel like the end of that film, while I'll grant you it's certainly not a happy ending. It's kind of a downer. I suppose I'm probably drawn to that type of story with that kind of ending. But man, I just feel like the end of The Wrestler is one of those classic film scenes. I mean, it just, I got goosebumps watching it this last time. I mean, it's just so intense, and you've been with this character for that journey, and like Gabe said, it's kind of inevitable. It's always been headed to this place. It's not going to end well, but there's just something about that scene, as you kind of see him fading in the ring, and you've got that one shot where he looks back up to see, and Marissa Tomei is gone, and that's kind of, that's like that last hope has just gone, and there's just literally nothing left for him. It's just, I love it. I love the end of that film, and I think that I definitely I feel like it's the stronger of the two in terms of the ending of the films. I think the end of Win-Win to me was actually far more dissatisfying. I think while I really enjoy the story overall, I think that the end is just a little bit of it's sort of anticlimactic for me. I mean, it's okay. He's everything's kind of been resolved, and now he's working at a bar, and okay, we'll see you folks later. Thanks for checking out the film. It's I don't feel like it's got that kind of that punch at the end that really kind of leaves you with that excited feeling at the end. With all that said, in terms of the directing overall, I think a lot of this will go back to what I've spoke to in previous categories. I think overall, Win-Win is very solid. I think it's well directed. I agree with Gabe that the direction does not draw attention to itself. It kind of gets out of the way. The characters and the story drive the movie. It's not trying to be anything edgy or crazy or in terms of the visuals. I think it's a very nice looking film. I do like the cinematography. I think it's really well composed, and it's just really, really well done.
Right.
With that said, I think Darren Aronofsky's direction of The Wrestler is, I have a hard time finding flaws with it. I mean, it's, and in all honesty, we're looking at these two films. We've said it before. I love both of these films. I'd watch them again. I'm having to get kind of nitpicky here to find, to pick one over the other. But to me, I feel like Aronofsky's direction in The Wrestler is just remarkable. I'm with Gabe in the sense that I'm not always the biggest fan of that, kind of raw, handheld, shaky cam kind of style. That's not necessarily my thing, but I think it fits and it works so perfectly for this story, and it makes it so real. I think it's a really strong choice, and even again, as that not being necessarily my personal aesthetic, I feel like it's so strong. It just really draws me into the story, and I think the strength of The Wrestler is that it really makes it. To me, there are parts of this film that are just literally hard to watch. I mean, the scenes, with the razor blade, with the staple gun and the barbed wire and all that stuff. I mean, there are parts where you're just like cringing and like almost want to turn away and, like shifting in my seat watching it. And I love that stuff though. I mean, there's stuff when I feel like if a film can kind of get in there and grab you and make you feel something like that, it's just, that's really impressive. And I think that the intensity of the film, I think a lot of that, it can be attributed to the direction. I think there are a lot of really strong choices. I think it's told in a very real way, and I think to me this is actually the knockout of the categories in terms of. I feel like the direction of The Wrestler is far above what is in Win-Win, and that's saying a lot because I think it's very good in Win-Win too. But my vote would go to The Wrestler.
All right, thanks, Nick. Tom.
All right, this segment's going to be brought to you by Sudafed. So if I pass out, the whole plan is to heap some praise on Win-Win, a little self-deprecation, make fun of Darren Aronofsky, and then give him my vote for it. So
I'm glad you.
Okay.
I'm glad you.
Here, wait. Let me write that down.
So if you hear snoring, I've passed out. That's what happened. So that's where we're going. One of the reasons I love Win-Win so much is that I feel like this is the kind of movie that I would direct. The Station Agent, another movie that Thomas McCarthy did, is another one that I really, really like, and I feel that I could relate to. And I feel that, like, if I made a feature film, this is the type of feature film that I would make. Mm-hmm. The Wrestler is not. And after some introspection, I started to wonder if maybe it's some of my confidence in my abilities as a director. Could I undertake a story like The Wrestler and make it entertaining and watchable? Whereas a movie like Win-Win, I feel like is a little bit more my speed, so to speak. Just like The Station Agent, I felt like would be the same way. That telling a movie about real life and real people, and that would kind of be my wheelhouse. So, maybe that's one reason why I relate to Win-Win and I like it so much, is that I feel that it would be something. This is something similar or akin to what I would create. So then so by thinking it that way, how can I not give my vote to The Wrestler? Because I feel that this is something that I couldn't do. That my abilities right now at this point in my life, I don't know if I could make a movie like The Wrestler. Now, had I given it a thought for, if I just tossed it around in my head, that I think I probably could have figured out how The Wrestler was going to end. I mean, the guy that made Pi and Black Swan and Requiem for a Dream, is it possible that the protagonist will throw him into this thing that he is so passionate about? He's going to throw away his entire life for this other, he's going to lose himself in his own passion. I can't imagine that happening in a Darren Aronofsky film. So, obviously there are these themes that are running through all of his films. And as he starts to get 6-7 movies away from Pi, and we start to see, this is an Aronofsky film. These are the themes that he likes to embrace, which makes me really excited for Noah that comes out in 2 years to see how he tells the story of Noah's Ark with that, with those themes in mind, or does he break away from it to just tell a story as we've all heard it? So I'm going to give my vote to The Wrestler begrudgingly, because I respect the direction in it so well and so much, and it's a really, really great work. And there are one of the things that I love about it. We've talked about how in Win-Win, Tom McCarthy always knows how to get out of the way and let the story happen. Darren Aronofsky does that too in The Wrestler, and I think that we get caught up in the wrestling scenes and stuff like that. But when Aronofsky needs to step out of the way and let the people tell their story, and there are particular scenes, between Marissa Tomei and Mickey Rourke and his daughter. Those scenes, he could have very easily, put a little Aronofsky spin on it, and he didn't. He backed off and let those scenes happen. And I think that in itself is a talent, and we can't overlook that either. So, directing vote, chalk it up to The Wrestler.
All right, thank you, Tom. You made it through, by the way.
Just barely.
I spoke too soon. Sam.
Well, interesting listening to you guys on that round. I think I'm going to follow Nick's lead, and I think it's time to smack it up. I don't disagree with anything Tom said, so you're off the hook this time, Tom. Gabe, we'll start with you. I find myself agreeing and disagreeing with you on certain points. I really love the way Thomas McCarthy does step back in Win-Win and kind of lets the story and the amazing ensemble do its work and not interfere with a lot of the touches. I think my biggest issues with what you said, Gabe, comes down to The Wrestler. Because I agree with you in that as a filmmaker, I love a lot of the choices that Darren Aronofsky makes in that film. But to me, they don't come across as unpolished or, anything other than the perfect choice for that particular film. Mm-hmm. The idea of him doing mostly documentary style, especially on a film that is so centered around one character, the closeness that we as an audience get and feel to that character is amazing, because we do follow him. We do have those moments, unlike traditional films where there's a cut and it's fast paced. We have those moments in waiting where he's waiting to go to the ring. He's hanging out backstage. So we're not seeing the main part of the focus or the action that's going on at that point. But much like the character itself, we're waiting in the wings. And that anticipation really helps. I think in a lot of ways it helps give the performance that Mickey Rourke is giving even more weight, because not only do we have this fantastic performance going on, but also very subtly through the camera, we are moving through those spaces. We are going through those dirty back rooms. We are waiting in those small gymnasiums. We are feeling that anticipation of someone who is broken, that probably definitely should not be wrestling, but yet he's going to these extreme measures, taping of the body and all the bandages, etc. And to even those other private moments inside the ring, which you would never see as part of mainstream wrestling, such as the actual, cutting of the razor blades and placement of the razor blades before the event. When we see some of the flashback sequences where you had said, maybe he should have mixed it up, and we see some of the end first. And I think he does that in some ways in that hardcore match where you see the end result first. But then through those flashbacks, we actually see what happened through it, intercut with, what's happening after the fact in the dressing room. And some of that is writing, absolutely. But the setup that it would take to film that, and I couldn't figure out as a director, do you shoot it in sequence? Do you shoot it in reverse sequence? How do you do that? But I was amazed at those choices. And the movement of the camera, I know this is a category we will talk about cinematography at some points.
Right.
I just found it beautiful. I mean, I love Win-Win. I think Thomas McCarthy did a great job in directing it. The tempo is fantastic. It's a great cast. He doesn't get in their way. He tells a very simple story, and I think the emotion swells from it. And that's why I love Win-Win. But when it comes down to this category as directing, I'm not really torn at all as to where my vote goes. And I think what won me over the most was some of the movement of those cameras, to go almost doc style, and so many shots to be following behind him as he's getting ready to walk into that ring, or seeing some very dark places inside, say, a strip club, where it's not perfectly exposed, it's dark, much like where his character is at that point, where you have lots of absence of light, but then you see some light, and you see the scene come alive in the stage lights and all that kind of stuff. I think it's very easy for me to give my vote in this category to The Wrestler for some amazing choices that in a way took the director outside of his comfort zone, and maybe some audience members outside of their comfort zone and what they expect from a polished Hollywood film of that kind of a budget. But the tale that you end up with is something that feels very real. And so when you get to the end and you follow this character all the way through his journey, because of the choices of direction, both with directing the actor and directing the camera, I think it pays off a lot more in The Wrestler. And that's my vote.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Thomas McCarthy, real quick. I've been doing a little research here. He wrote Up, like he helped write Up. And he was also the dad, like the stepdad in 2012. I don't know why I found that amusing, but I guess he's the airplane pilot. Yeah, that movie was bad too. Another one for Cinesmack, but let's go ahead and we'll move on to our final round, which is overall. Mr. Wilson, you kick us off.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I noticed you brought up the Thomas McCarthy co-wrote up, and I noticed that as well when I was doing some research last night. And can we all just have a moment and reflect on how awesome of a movie Up is? Because I know it's off topic, but that movie is really, really good. So that aside, when we get into the overall category, I think it's time to look at what is the most key element of both of these films. And to me, that's clearly the Nintendo product placement. It's an element that I did not expect to tie these films together, but as a video game geek and a Nintendo fanboy, I couldn't help but notice that we had the repeated scenes of playing the Wii in Win-Win, and then the awesome touch in The Wrestler of the old school NES and the game where they're actually playing as Ram and Ayatollah. I thought it was fantastic. I love that touch. I thought that was a perfect example of one of those little details in The Wrestler. I think there were a lot of really nice. I think they paid really good attention to those small details, and those sorts of things also contribute to, I think, making that whole movie feel very real and really suck you into that world and make you feel like you're a part of it.
Right.
That obviously, that's kind of a small note. In the big picture, overall, I think, we've covered obviously we've covered all the elements. I think Win-Win, like I said before, I think it's a really good movie. I'd watch it again. I probably will watch it again. It is the kind of movie, the kind of story that I really enjoy. I like those, kind of ensemble pieces. I think the characters all blend together really well. There's some really interesting relationships, and I think it's really solid to bottom. I think the things that I mentioned before, particularly the kind of minor characters and some of their little subplots, I feel like distract a little bit. I think that occasionally the tone of the film suffers a little bit because of it. To me, it falters a little bit in terms of, in the big picture overall. I think that while this film is not a comedy, I think there's a lot of, very genuine and sort of organic humor that just comes from the characters and their interactions. Mm-hmm. But in the case of, the characters of Terry and Zig and this, their sort of weird subplots, and if you haven't noticed yet, this is my hang up with this film. It just drove me nuts. These characters and some of these scenes just felt so strange and pointless, but it just felt like some of those scenes, there was like this sort of injection of forced comedy. Like, we want to be goofy now. We want to kind of, lighten the mood, and I just didn't feel like it needed it. So to me, that was kind of the only part, really. And again, I'm being, nitpicky. I'm finding things wrong with movies that I really like.
Right.
But that's the drawback for me of Win-Win. The Wrestler, again, I think it's a movie where I don't necessarily think the script is anything to write home about, but I think that the acting and the directing are so at such a high level that they really elevate that script and make that story that really draws you in. I think, I've covered it. I think that the end of that film is a classic scene. I mean, it's so memorable and it just sticks in your mind. I think that the performance of Mickey Rourke is an all-time great. I don't think of myself as someone who is prone to hyperbole. I don't want to, be too over the top in my praise, but I think that I think Win-Win is a very good movie. I think The Wrestler is a great movie, and so I think overall I would definitely vote for The Wrestler.
All right.
And if I had to call this, if we're looking at this like a fist fight between these two films, again, this would be a very good fist fight. I think it would be very close, and it would be something I would pay to see. So, kudos to both of these films and everyone involved in making them. They're both very good, but I think The Wrestler is the superior film.
All right, thanks, Nick. It's funny you bring the video game up. The video game that Randy and his child neighbor play in the trailer was created especially for the film and was fully playable. The game features similar graphics to the original WWF WrestleMania Nintendo game. So there you go.
Nice. Now that's a collector's item. Somebody really needs to track down that playable game.
Yes, I agree. All right, Tom.
When I watch a movie, I'm one of those people that I like to watch some growth happen. And my biggest problem with The Wrestler, and I'd said this earlier, is the end scene when Marissa Tomei is throwing herself at him, and he still walks away because, God dang it, in the end, he's a wrestler. Didn't you see the poster when you're walking into the theater? And that's just the kind of person I am. Life is too short to watch a 2-hour movie about somebody stuck in a rut that doesn't lift themselves up and move themselves beyond the rut. As interesting as, professional wrestling is to all of us, that was the biggest problem I had with The Wrestler is this. And I'll go back to it. Aronofsky does this with all of his films. The crazy ballerina that can't break out of the craziness. The mathematician that his math overtakes his life and he can't get out of it. And what happens to people when their passions and the things that they love consume them, as opposed to the other way around. And there's this lack of growth. It's just it looks like my yard right now, just a complete lack of growth. And and growth, whether they're talking about plants or people or whatever, it can be destructive and it can be beautiful and it's a transformation. And that's one of the reasons I love watching movies is to see how these stories about how they affect people. And with Aronofsky's movies, the people usually wind up where they were at the beginning, except a little bit crazier. And it just doesn't do it for me, And I would rather watch a movie like Win-Win, where the people learn some of their lessons and they're better off for it in the end. And there's some change happening, and there's actually some forward motion. It doesn't have to be forward motion, but motion. Gosh, go one way or the other. Don't spend 2 hours meandering around the boardwalk to wind up at the exact same spot you were before. I mean, that's like sad and pathetic and tragic, and not in an entertaining way. And so I'm going to give my overall vote to Win-Win because I found it to be a movie that I can relate to a little bit more, and I found it to be more entertaining. I thought The Wrestler was a really, really great movie, and it made me sad that he made those choices in the end after given so many second chances that he decides that. I was going to throw in a wrestling term like a flying turnbuckle, but I don't remember them from.
On crossbody.
I have not been 8 years old for a long time, so so I'd like to give my vote to Win-Win in the overall category.
All right, thank you, Tom.
Thank you,
Sam.
Great points, everyone, so far. This has been a very interesting discussion of two amazing films. There's a lot I like about both of them. In the last round, I couldn't do anything but praise Darren Aronofsky for his choices as a director, and I feel very strongly about that. But in some ways, as far as, when it comes down to this, it comes down to watchability, how I relate to the film. The overall is a big catch-all for a lot of things. And I really, really, really am drawn to Win-Win. From the first time I watched this film, I was just engrossed in it. And, I enjoyed The Wrestler as well, especially because I did enjoy a lot of wrestling when I was younger. And so I felt almost at home watching The Wrestler because it was cool to kind of see the behind the scenes and think about all the wrestlers that I liked and what maybe they're doing nowadays. Win-Win was a different experience both times. When I rewatched it, within the last day, all of these very positive emotions about that film came back to me. And I know our guest panelists tonight, Nick, didn't really care for some of the shtickiness or some of the business between the Terry character and the Steven character. I like that. And to smack it up a bit, I think I think that is one of the endearing points about Win-Win to me. It's one of the things that make the film so enjoyable. To me, it's a very honest tale about real life. And not that The Wrestler isn't. It shows you an aspect of a particular character in a very extreme situation, being a wrestler and what that different kind of lifestyle is. But the beauty of Win-Win is it's a very relatable story for a wide audience that shows sometimes how the ebbs and flows of life, the ups and downs, are what makes life great. And whereas the ending of Win-Win may have left Nick unfulfilled in that, it was kind of like, okay, thanks for coming out, we're all good. I didn't see it that way. The way that I interpret it was, much like life, we're going to go through these series of ups and downs. It's what we take away from those experiences that make our life. And even though, his character wasn't necessarily the better, he's still broke. He had to take a second job. But the reason why he did was so that he could care for this new family. Mm-hmm. And that through his love, they were able to bring the Alex character, give him a focus in life, bring him a meaning to his young life that may have saved that character's life from not going to college or not finishing high school. And as much as he gave to Alex gave to him. It made him realize his faults at points, that some of his ulterior motives for what he did with Leo weren't necessarily right. And some could say that was predictable, that you knew that confrontation was coming. And yes, maybe it was. But in a lot of ways, it helped his character grow. Not in huge ways that changed his life or made him, super rich or a totally different character, but in a way reaffirmed his connection to his family and a new type of family. And I think that's what I thought was so beautiful, is that Alex is, a different character, one that many people or society would just kind of, push off because he's had a troubled past. Yes, there was promise, but he had raw talent. And in a lot of ways, through fresh eyes, Paul Giamatti's character, Mike, was able to view Alex as a different person. And because of that, Alex was able to find that strength within himself. And then we also were exposed to the totality of the human condition, the fact that we're all flawed, that we all do things very selfishly sometimes. But the good news is that there is a chance through honesty and through coming together with your family that you can find a happier place and you can work on those faults, and that you might not be perfect, but you can reach a place of happy existence. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's not a throwaway ending. That's an ending that I would like to seek for my own life. And I thought it was very beautiful. So as much as there's some fantastic work in The Wrestler, I think Win-Win is a smaller story that not as many people have seen. But if they do, it will make them focus on issues in their own life and realize that it's all about focusing on the small things, focusing on our families, focusing on the love that is there instead of what's not there. So I'm going to have to give my vote to Win-Win.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Gabe?
Wow. That's interesting. I'm surprised after the directing round that Sam went that way, actually. Because, obviously Sam felt pretty strongly about Darren Aronofsky's choices and his directing skill. And, in all honesty, I don't disagree with any of that. I believe that there were some very conscious choices made in the directing of that film. And they are very visible in the end result. But for me, like I said, I've seen it twice. and that was maybe once too many, because for some reason the culmination of those choices still left me disappointed somehow, and I can't explain it. I don't know why, because I wanna like it, because there is some great direction, great acting. It's a strong, powerful story, but I think if the sum of all those things is still negative, there's something went wrong there, and I'm usually kind of considered a movie snob. I'm the kind of guy who likes the movies that nobody else likes.
Yes, indeed.
Really, it's like I don't want to go see generally speaking, I don't want to go see the summer blockbusters. I don't want to see the movies with the happy endings. They're so predictable. They're so unrealistic. They're just they're out there to make money, and that's all. And so you would think that I would be drawn to a movie like The Wrestler and see all the great things in it. And I do see great things in it. But I've also had an experience where I've seen a movie once and just hated it and been like, I hated that movie. And then for whatever reason or another, I've seen it again, and I've kind of forgiven it and said, I really kind of judged it too harshly the first time around. And actually have maybe come to like that movie. But it didn't happen with The Wrestler. I wanted to go into it a second time and see something different with it, and have it kind of redeem itself for me. And I don't know. It's really hard to argue any of these guys' points where the directing is really solid, and that they made very conscious choices, and that these things were meaningful in that context, and the acting was great. And Mickey Rourke, I've never seen another Mickey Rourke movie, and if I did, I probably wouldn't like it. But he did such a great job in this, and I want all those things to add up to something positive, but they just don't, and I can't explain it. I don't know what it is. Win-Win, on the other hand, is much like what Sam was saying. There's maybe all these slightly smaller numbers that get added up. You've got good, if not great, acting performances, and you've got good, if not great, directing, and you've got good, if not great, cinematography, and the same goes for all of the categories we've talked about, writing. But in the end, maybe they're not great, but the sum of all those things is positive in some way or another. I'm drawn to that. I enjoyed it. I was left feeling happy that I watched this movie in some way or another. Maybe not, obviously the ending is pretty happy. It's a very positive film. But I don't require that. I just want to feel satisfied when I get done with the movie. Like, oh, that was really cool, and I really enjoyed that, and that gave something to me. And I felt that way about Win-Win. Whereas I felt like The Wrestler took something from me, and I can't explain it. I don't know what it is that it took, but it took it twice, and I'm not happy about it. And so I think it's hard for me to give my overall vote to The Wrestler, because overall I was disappointed with it more than once. And we've talked about repeatedly on this show about rewatchability. What movie would I go back to? What movie would I see again? And I think I would definitely watch Win-Win again, no problem. I've seen The Wrestler twice, and I don't think I really want to watch it again. And maybe it's just the thematic material that's so discouraging to me. I don't know. But I have a hard time not giving my vote to Win-Win.
All right. Thank you, Gabe.
Yep.
All right. Well, I've got to do math. I've got to talk with the monkey. So let's go ahead and we'll move on to recommendations. And we will start it this month with Tom.
All right. Well, if you're like me, you can never get enough politics, and this this is a time of season where there's just not simply enough politics out there for me. So I'm going to recommend a political comedy movie that came out of England. It's called In the Loop. It has got to be one of the funniest movies I have ever seen in my entire life. The swearing in this movie alone deserved an Oscar for screenplay, and it was nominated, I believe, for its screenplay. And the swearing it's an art in this movie. the way that these people come up with ways to insult and ridicule each other. But the movie is basically about the underlings at the State Department of the United States, not the head of state, but the people that work below them, and all of the bickering and back and forth that the United States and England go back and forth between at the start of this war with this unnamed country, and how facts are twisted and people have different motives and everything else. It's very, very dialogue driven. There's hardly any action in it at all. But the dialogue is really, really hilarious. The actors in it are really great. James Gandolfini is in it as the army general that's trying to keep his soldiers basically out of the war. Mm-hmm. Peter Capaldi is genius. The whole movie is loosely based on a TV show in England called The Thick of It, which is very similar, obviously. And I would definitely recommend it. Please, and I started off by saying the thing about the politics, and it's a political movie and everything else, but don't avoid it because of that. Because if you want to see some very witty writing and swearing that comes at you a mile a minute, it's really, really good. I wish I could give you some examples here, but I'm trying to avoid the explicit tag, I think, on this show. So In the Loop, check it out. It's really good. 2009, one of my favorites.
Thank you, Tom. Sam?
Well, this month for my recommendation, I wanted to recommend a documentary that actually was playing out in my head quite a bit when I was watching The Wrestler. It's a documentary from 1999 called Beyond the Mat, and it's a very heartfelt documentary that focuses on the lives of professional wrestlers and how, in some aspects, their sport is not fake, and in the way it takes a toll on their bodies and a lot of times their lives. And I think if you watch this, you'll see a lot of things that are in this documentary about these real professional wrestlers that are echoed in the movie The Wrestler. You see wrestlers such as Mick Foley, Terry Funk, who's about to retire at this point. You also see backstage stuff from The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And a lot of times this true documentary does emulate a lot of shots that you see in The Wrestler. And more importantly, you get to see, if you were into wrestling in the 80s especially, some wrestlers that you may have idolized or really admired at one point, such as Jake the Snake Roberts, and see how far they have fallen and how this lifestyle of wrestling has taken a real effect on them. You get to see Vince McMahon from the World Wrestling Federation or World Wrestling Entertainment now. I always refer to it as the WWF. I will never call it the WWE. But you get to see a lot of behind the scenes. You get to see them casting wrestlers. You get to see them you get to see kind of these broken down wrestlers at these really small shows pissing in garbage pails. And like I think there's one point Greg the Hammer Valentine, who used to be very big in the 80s in WWE, WWF, whatever. You see him basically, he's reduced to this, he's pissing in a garbage can in this really kind of makeshift backstage area. You get to see Coco Beware, who's still, he's the guy with the birds. He still has the birds, but he's a lot older now. And you just get a much different look at some of these people that at one time in your life you may have considered superstars, and how crazy this whole business of professional wrestling is. And also how much physical toll that the sport that so many people will say is fake, which, yes, it is fake as far as the outcomes of a lot of the matches and stuff. But as far as, some of the physical punishment that some of these performers take, it's very real. And because of that, they, some of them are driven to lives of drugs to kind of correct or try and make right all the pain that they have to suffer just to make a living. If you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. It's Beyond the Mat from 1999. Fantastic documentary, and it goes hand in hand with our wrestling theme this month.
Nice. Thank you, Sam. Gabe.
Okay, well, that was a very good choice, Sam. I haven't seen it, but it was very topical. And I usually try to do the same thing, try to have a movie that's kind of related to what we've been talking about. But I didn't accomplish that this month. I actually recently saw a movie called Contagion on HBO.
I've watched that too.
It was a movie, I believe it's Steven Soderbergh, right?
Yep.
It was a movie that I was kind of interested in when it came out, but not really highly interested in. But it came on HBO. I had a chance to watch it, and I'm glad I did because it was actually much better than I expected it to be. And it was an interesting and frightening look at what might happen if we were to encounter kind of another superbug, a new disease that would spread rapidly through the human population. And it was very scary, and I thought it was really really well made. The way they told the story, and it was well acted. It was interesting. It had a lot of well-known actors in it, including Matt Damon and Gwyneth Paltrow and that kind of thing. But it's interesting because it's truly an ensemble cast. There's no real main character, and kind of fear or panic might be kind of considered the main character. In this movie, there's no human that really is kind of the lead. That it's kind of interesting in that respect, in that there are these really famous actors in the movie, but they all kind of play smaller roles. They're all supporting roles to this kind of disease to a certain degree. And I thought it was a very kind of believable approach to that concept. I'm not sure it was realistic, but it was plausible, if you know what I mean. And I actually kind of enjoyed it. It's been on HBO a couple of times, and I've actually let it play. I watched it once all the way through, and then I just happened across it, and I let it play, which means something to me if I'm gonna sit through something like that again. And one of the interesting things about it is that the way they film it, it really makes you think about what you're touching throughout the day, because there's so many parts of it where it's like, oh, this person just coughed on their hand and they touched this doorknob and another person and all these other things, a glass and all these other things on the way, and it's something that you're not necessarily conscious of all the time. But this movie does a really good job of kind of bringing it to your attention, like, oh my God. There have been a couple of people at work who have kind of had a cough lately. And after watching this movie, it makes me think, oh my God, why are they here? Why are they in the office? This stuff is just getting spread all over the office. What have they touched? What have I touched? Don't touch your face. You touch your face 3,000 times a day. Oh my God, really? No way. Yes, you do. And so it's kind of interesting how it kind of builds. It brings that to your attention. And it kind of builds that paranoia a little bit.
I agree,
but not so much that you are suddenly OCD after you've seen this movie. And so I thought it was a really interesting approach to that concept, and I thought it was really well done. Another thing, my recommendation. Another reason I was drawn to this movie is because my recommendation last month was the movie Drive, and I've really come to kind of enjoy the soundtrack to Drive. I listen to it a lot, actually, and it's not the kind of it's not kind of happy, uplifting kind of music, but I really kind of enjoy it. And the same guy did the soundtrack for Contagion, and it's also very well done. It's very different in many respects, but it's also very well done. So that was another thing that drew me to this movie is to hear his soundtrack for it. And I think it's a soundtrack that drives the film and also supports it very well. So it's not something that I thought I would suggest, but I enjoyed it a lot, and I thought it was very kind of a very kind of revealing and plausible approach to the idea of a contagion.
So I watched Contagion while Amanda was taking a nap in our hotel room. I watched it, and then we later went out to eat in Denver. In Denver. And the entire time, I'm looking at my glass, I'm watching the waiter, I'm wondering what he's touched. I'm watching everyone else around them touching their face and everything.
Yeah.
Drove me nuts, but it's a good flick.
Well, it's like one of those documentaries like Food Inc. or whatever. It's like, you never want to go out to eat again.
Right.
You never, unless you raised that chicken yourself and saw what it ate and butchered it yourself. You don't want to eat any of that again. I don't know that it's that bad, but it was definitely an interesting and kind of enlightening look.
All right, Mr. Wilson.
Yes, I feel like if Contagion breaks out, I think I'm probably in the safest spot up here on Mars, right? I mean,
right.
I'll be like the last hope for humanity.
You will be.
You guys will all be wiped out by some crazy epidemic. So sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, but
probably shouldn't have touched your face so much, I guess.
Yeah, I touch my face all the time.
My only thing is,
constantly.
You and the rover are going to have to get together and have like little rover babies.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to populate?
Hey, we'll have to work it out. It's not a perfect system, but
Some people love their work, but Nick loves his work.
That rover is hot.
It's got an oven on it. Did you hear that?
It has an oven on it?
It has an oven, so it can, I guess, cook, cookies. It's literally hot. I'm not joking. It's got an oven on. I'm not. That wasn't a punchline.
I know.
Literally
making Toll House for the Martians.
If it's got an oven, I'm sure it's got other things that will satisfy Nick.
And for Nick.
I love you, Rover. You're such a good cook.
You never go too far away.
So I kind of took us off topic there, but as far as my pick, I also did not stay on topic. I thought briefly about wrestling films, and was there another film that some way related that I enjoyed, and I didn't think about it too long because I don't think there's much there, but. I did, as I was kind of just roaming around and browsing IMDb in my research last night, and I was looking through Marissa Tomei's filmography, just kind of reminding myself of some of the films that I've seen her in that I enjoyed in the past, and I was struck by one that when I saw it, I kind of had to think for a second, and I was reminded that she was in this film because I'd kind of forgotten her. And that is Four Rooms. From 1995. She plays a pretty small role in it, but that's my connection to this month. So I felt like I had to connect it somehow. But it's definitely Four Rooms is one of my favorite films from the early to mid '90s kind of time period. It's kind of a unique film in that it's basically like 4 short films. There are 4 different writer-directors, each of whom wrote and directed a sort of a separate little short film, each one based in a different room of a hotel.
Yep.
And the whole thing's tied together by this central character of Ted the Bellhop, which is played by Tim Roth. And I think Tim Roth is fantastic in this movie. Really a great performance. And it actually, it reminded me, like I said, I had kind of forgotten that Marissa Tomei was in this. She plays a very small role. It kind of reminds me of what Gabe was just saying about Contagion. It's that kind of movie where, because it's sort of broken up into these little vignettes, there are a lot of characters in this film, and many of them are played by some fairly notable actors and some familiar faces. And as you kind of go through I was going through the cast list of the film and just sort of being reminded, like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot Bruce Willis was in this movie, and Antonio Banderas, and there's a lot of really good actors, really good performances. It's to me, it's just an enjoyable film. It's a comedy. Each of the rooms kind of has its own feel. They kind of have different tones to them because they're created by different filmmakers, and yet they do tie together. And like I said, the performance of Tim Roth really brings the whole thing to life, I think. There's some really memorable parts. I feel like the very end of the film is really memorable and classic ending. It's one that I've always enjoyed. It's like I said, that sort of early to mid '90s time frame. I feel like in recent years there have been a lot of the films that I really enjoyed back then that I've gone back to and been a little disappointed. They don't quite hold up as well as I might have remembered. Four Rooms has not been that. I watched it again recently and was reminded just how enjoyable it is. It still holds up, I think, as a really good film and one of my favorites from the '90s. So yeah, that's my pick. Four Rooms.
Good pick. Very good pick. I love that movie. All right, I'm going to try and tie into all of yours. I don't know if I can with Tom's. But, okay, so wrestling, it's a guilty pleasure movie, and I just remember watching it a lot back in college, and that was Ready to Rumble with David Arquette. And, it's a lot of fun. It's probably not that great of a movie. I haven't seen it in a couple years, so my opinion could have changed, but I'm going to go with that because I loved Oliver Platt's character for some reason, and Rose McGowan's in it, and she's pretty to look at. But my true recommendation is something called Down and Dirty Pictures, Miramax, Sundance, and the Rise of Independent Film. And it's not even a movie or a TV show. It's a book. It's something I've been listening to thanks to Audible. And it actually has a lot of stories in there about Steven Soderbergh. And it has, probably, since I've been listening to an audiobook, probably 20, 30 minutes about Four Rooms. And what it took to get that made. There's some scary stuff that goes on with the Weinsteins. I'm kind of glad I don't ever have to deal with them directly ever, and I hope I probably will never have to deal with them directly. But I would check it out. It's a great book. You can get it on Audible.com, or you can just buy the hard copy for $4.10 on Amazon. It's too good to pass up, especially if you love movies and you love learning about what it takes to get a movie made. So let's go ahead and we'll move on to who won this bout. Let me poke the monkey here.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Win-Win!
Yay!
That was really close.
If I had known that, I would have voted for the wrestler in the overall so that you would have a shot, Mike. Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
I really hated both of them. I was just trying to make a tie. Just kidding.
So yeah. Well, let's go around the table here, and we'll start with Tom. Where can people follow you, get a hold of you, watch some of your stuff?
Hey, Vimeo and Facebook, look for Tom Haggis. I'm there.
All right. Sam.
You can also find me on Facebook. 48-Hour Film Project Des Moines is winding down for another year, but you can always find us at 48hourfilm.com/Des Moines. Find out about the event, the winners, and also, if you need to, get a hold of me.
All right. Gabe?
Well, you can find me on Facebook, Gabriel Rowold, Rowold, and you can also find some of our 48-hour films on YouTube. Our production team name is One Genome Short Productions. So if you look up One Genome Short on YouTube, you should find some of our films there.
All right, Nick.
I guess people can find me if they want to. I've never really known anybody to want to find me, but if you would like to, I am on the Facebook. My name is Nick Wilson. You can find me there. I do have a YouTube channel. It is under the name Wilson Nick, all one word, WILSONNICK. Some of my short films, 48-hour films, and some other little projects are up there. So, yeah.
All right. Well, you can find me on Facebook and on Twitter. Just search Mike Keeler, and you can also find Southsider Studios on both as well, and visit southsiderstudios.com. We don't have a lot up yet, but we're working on it. I want to thank Tom, Sam, and Gabe, as usual. Thanks, you guys, for being a part of the show. And Nick, thank you so much for being a special guest. We've really been wanting to get you on here for the last couple shows, and I'm glad you could finally make it, especially since you're on Mars.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. And it's, the wonders of technology that allow us from this distance. It really is a remarkable feat. So I'd like to just make a special thanks to technology for making this all happen tonight. I really do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. Hope to do it again sometime.
Good.
I'm impressed that you've been able to keep up with the discussion with the 14-minute delay. It's really, really way to go.
I've sort of had to guess. Like, I'll just kind of imagine what someone might have said. Hopefully I've been kind of close.
Well, some of us are very predictable, so I could, me included.
All right. Well, we would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on iTunes or whatever podcasting service you use. Of course, you can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, just like the rest of us. Just search Cinesmack. Next episode, join us as Blank Man goes toe-to-toe with Orgasmo. I can't talk. And we welcome another special guest. Don't know who it is yet. Might be Nick, because he's still going to be on Mars. He's got nothing to do. So for Gabe, Sam, Tom, Nick, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
It's a win-win, baby.
I started crying because I didn't think he was going to show up.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.